Welcome to Arc Rambles with mildly amused Milksnake, where I overshare my thoughts on randomly chosen topics over our gameplay, just to justify spending hours in game being unproductive or boring. And today's topic is veganism. Don't ask me why, it just popped into my brain while writing the previous Ramble script that I ended up accidentally deleting, as an example of topics that people often discuss about coming into the conversation with completely different or incompatible base beliefs or axioms. Here I'm just gonna present mine, even if I might come across as controversial. I don't mean to offend you if you disagree or feel moral different about it. I'm just trying to offer food for thought. Now, what do I think about it? In the past, I actually gave a vegan diet a try, since I heard it can improve your health and vitality. And at least the kind that I tried for a few months. Primarily legume and fruit based with smaller additions of leafy greens and nuts. Didn't really work very well for me. My blood results weren't terrible, or, well, worse than usual. But I had very low energy, as the starchy vegetables and legumes always caused me to power down to digest them. In the end, I just ended up feeling tired and groggy most of the time, so I went back to omnivorous diet. Perhaps veganism can be healthy for some, or there is some magic recipe with unknown ingredients, as there are individuals with particular sensitivities. But it wasn't for me. Then again, I was never an ideological vegan, and I think I could never be. Do I disagree with inhumane treatment of animals in big meat industry? Yeah, I'm all against causing unnecessary suffering, but from all the unnecessary suffering, death isn't nearly close to the worst. And well, yeah, domestic cows or pigs or any other animal does not want to be killed by us for food. It also doesn't consent to be killed by anything else. It will still eventually die. A wild bison doesn't consent to being eaten by wolves or something. And yeah, we're not just instinct-based animals like wolves who don't consider morality of their actions. But eating isn't for me a moral issue. Whether you believe the world was constructed by God or is a web of patterns emergent through random chance, we can clearly see that life, in order to survive and replicate, consumes other life, or substances that originate from it. Such is the world, it's just how our bodies run. In the end, plants, even bacteria, are life too. So where do we draw the line? What we can morally take life from, despite it wanting to live? Especially that simpler organisms that don't have as much of consciousness seem to want to live and thrive the hardest, as they don't have complex psychology that could lead them to conclude non-existence to be less painful option in some cases. Can assumed will to live of the organism that is about to be killed for consumption ever matter in a world like that? I don't think so. More commonly used argument is that we shouldn't kill and eat creatures that can suffer in a way that we can recognize, or feel and be mentally aware of pain. That creates a clearer distinction because it reserves right not to be eaten to creatures with complex enough nervous systems. Some people assign it to all the animals, some exclusively to vertebrates. But is there a real moral problem within their deaths? Like, sure, being killed sucks, both for domestic and wild animals. But animals inherently cannot establish a mutual social contract between species to avoid it. It's just part of life. What we should, as humans, take moral issue with is the conditions they live in before they're killed. We're easily capable of providing other animals with safer and more comfortable conditions than the wilds, and some of us do. I just wish megacorps did too, or at least made it not so horrible. In the light of that, does a short period of discomfort before death even matter? Is killing the animal, however painless, cruelty in itself? I think it's more that the sum of their experience matters on whether or not we are cruel to them, not if they ended up dead in early adulthood or in their elderly state. Death is a point though where, in most beliefs that I know of, all suffering for an animal ends. Animal doesn't want it, of course, because its instinct is to survive and reproduce the longest it can. But is any animal's life overall a net negative experience just by virtue of ending up being killed for food? What about the animals that are being put down because they're sick and elderly? Is that alright because we assume that they want their suffering to end? Even if it is just an assumption still. Really, can you even say with confidence that every human who dies suddenly in their teenage years would anguish in whatever afterlife you believe in that he was deprived of a chance at living full 100 years? Yeah, because they're human, they might have some regrets over things they haven't accomplished yet, if they still exist, because they have hopes and dreams and long-term plans. More so than average animal, even a very intelligent one, since, as far as I know, most animal species live almost completely in the present. It's rather unlikely that a cow dreams what is going to be doing in years to come that she might never survive to see. But in the end, even as a human with plans and dreams, your short lifespan would not invalidate the happiness or contentment until that point. Especially if that's majority of your experience. Life wasn't cruel to you on the mere virtue of being short. There's more to sum up anyone's life than that. And so I don't think we're being cruel for raising animals for food, if we don't raise them in cruel ways, even if we end up cutting their natural lifespan short for the benefit of our own species. And think of it, even humans rarely actually die of old age, and not disease or something. Death by old age is not something anything alive in this world is ever entitled to. At least that's my belief. I think we're only entitled to attempt to do whatever we can to survive. However, if a bear decides your existence is due for termination and executes it, your departed soul can't really sue any higher power after all. That's how the world was made to be. Even if we let all animals just be wild and end the domestication of farmed species, their wild counterparts' lifespan would still regularly be cut short by other animals or pathogens or even their own species. And their life standards would probably be much lower than what humans who care about animal welfare can provide them in exchange for their meat after a certain age. Many of prey animals born in the wild wouldn't even make it close to the typical slaughter age, considering that some herbivore species even develop reproductive strategies that rely on synchronizing their births with the rest of the herd, to make it less likely for predators to be able to eat all of the babies, because that's just how hard it is to defend them. Not to even mention that life in the wild is consistently ridden with diseases, parasites and injuries. I understand why domestication might seem like enslavement from humans' point of view, where we value our ability to make decisions about our future and day-to-day routine. We value a very abstract concept of fulfillment, or reaching our full potential. But is it that for simpler-minded animals? To project those values onto them is assumption. No, to be fair, it is also an assumption to say they absolutely don't. Some species might be capable of that, but it is certainly not obvious from the way they behave when domesticated. It was just an evolutionary trait of further species. One that their ancestors made, making sure the species propagates in exchange for shorter lifespans and providing human ancestors with value. And in an optimal scenario, on a family farm where animals are raised with care, being friendly with the hairless ape that might eventually eat you may actually be preferable from a cow's or pig's point of view, compared to living in the wilderness when you have to be on edge for your life every single day, not just that final day. Not to mention, I believe, as any other species, we are entitled to put the health and well-being of our own above other species. Just like a boar is entitled to care for her fellow boars in the sounder, more than they care about the welfare of that hairless ape that looks vaguely threatening. Call me speciesist, but giving up significant source of our nutrition for the virtue of not consuming other animals would render keeping good health unnecessarily difficult for our fellow humans. Therefore, by enforcing such policy, you'd be causing a lot of humans to suffer. So, you'd still not be clear on that causing suffering point that vegans are making. You're just choosing a side with different species, but you're still just as prone to enact suffering upon other life forms as any other life form around you. Especially when you count the collateral loss of animal life caused in habitat loss and plant farming. If we really want to raise above moral standard of wild animals when it comes to consumption, we should first address the conditions the animals we harvest for food spend their lives in, for the duration that we let them live. I'm fully for, as much as it is financially possible for any individual, boycotting factory farmed products or lobbying for better and more sensible animal welfare regulations that favor small farming over big corpos that invalidate non-factory farm-based production on competitive scale. Because think of it, we're the only animals capable of even caring about inflicting suffering on other species as a whole. We should absolutely pursue reduction in environmental damage and unnecessary torture to other species. With the technologies we have, even inflicting death doesn't have to be torturous. But I don't think there's anything particularly noble in crippling and murdering our species because animals consuming other animals in the wild, or even going extinct under our massive plantations for plant-based nutrition, is somehow morally superior to us eating what we're capable of extracting good amount of nutrition from. Of course, I can hear you if you're a vegan. Some people argue that stopping meat consumption would be environmentally beneficial because of unsustainable practices of massive-scale factory farms that also, by the way, heavily lean on unsustainable agriculture practices, as most factory farmed meat is from animals raised on grain. But that again misses the crucial point, at least from the facts that I know so far. Because animal flesh and organs are so calorically and nutritionally dense, when you try to live a healthy life without it, you end up consuming a lot of products grown and imported from all over the world that don't grow in your local community, that require extensive transport and distribution expenditures, including CO2 emissions. Not to mention some of those products that are highly valued by vegans, like avocados, cashews, plant oils, are sourced from plantations that exploit local populations and their water supply in places where they can be grown. No person, for example, in Poland or somewhere could stay properly nourished just on locally grown plant crops, not for a long time at least. Growing demand for those crops also increases the amount of labor abuse in poor communities that have appropriate climate to grow them. A vision of a completely vegan world is one where countries cannot sustain their own populations from their own land for long in cases where chain of delivery breaks due to political tensions or other disasters, and food supply is held irreversibly hostage by global corporations, even more than it is now. Meanwhile, just one cow, which on average requires about 2 to 5 acres of pasture per year, can graze in most places on Earth even the ones that are unsustainable for agriculture, can make sure a family stays nourished for about a year if used efficiently. Animal farming, even though it might outwardly seem like the current unsustainable practices in it are the worst offenders, is what makes departure from unsustainable practices even possible if we put more weight on homesteads and local farms instead. In the end though, if your conscience is against eating certain animals at all, do what you think is right. I'm not the one to yell, "Eat the vegans," or "Vegan food isn't real food." I honestly find those statements obnoxious and inflammatory, designed only to insult people for something they choose for themselves. In fact, I do find a lot of vegan dishes and meat alternatives quite tasty, but please don't advocate for policies that aim to deprive others of choice whether or not they want to eat vegan. Let our society be such that accommodates people regardless of food preferences. There is no natural law or entirely understood practical reason that I know of that would justify such limitation on humanity. But our time is almost up, and as the night is coming to its end, please like and subscribe if you thought this take was reasonable, and perhaps want to hear more of my random topic rambles. And if you don't agree, let me know in the comments section. Believe it or not, I'm actually eager to hear you out and learn new facts if there's something I haven't yet considered. I am not afraid of discussion and have no intention of mocking your point of view. I hope you all can return the favor. Now, last time I gave a misleading hint on what ramble I would be working on next, but I've already been working on a script for a ramble about arguments, which I hope you'll find interesting too. As for today's video, I am done and see you in the next one. Bye!